Hi, and welcome to the Heal from Within series, where we're talking about healing our bodies, healing our lives, and healing all naturally, raising our frequency so we can live our best, healthiest lives. And I'm your host, Jodi Geline. And today I have Karen Shear on, and she is someone who she's a midlife transformation guide, desire factor and law of attraction life coach, energy master, and author that guides women in releasing what no longer lights them up so they can joyfully thrive in their second half of life. Welcome, Karen.
Oh, thank you, Jodi. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited about this series.
Yes, me too, because we're going to be talking about the inner critic. And
Mhm.
we've never had that, right? I mean, this is, I mean, everybody has an inner critic. It's just the reality. So it's exciting to find out, okay, what can we do about this inner critic? So I want to ask you, why is it even important to soothe that inner critic inside?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned first, we all have one. We all have an inner critic.
Yeah.
And the good news is we all have inner wisdom too. We just might not be able to hear it. So
Yeah.
yeah, let's talk about that nagging, pesky little inner critic voice. You know, what's really, I think, a good place to start is basically how it's designed and why we need to soothe that and why it's in our best interest to soothe it for our health, for our well-being, for our personal growth. um, and it what it does in effect is we hear the whisperings of our inner critic, but what it does is it creates disempowering and untrue whisperings of that self-talk, that chatter that we hear in our minds, and it doesn't feel good. And it's that thing that kind of keeps us down, keeps us not in our best place. And it basically comes from conditioned responses based on the life experiences we've had, our self judgments, our fears, our, from evolution, the fight or flight responses. And it's hard coded in a little part of our brain, the reptilian part of our brain, the amygdala. And it basically is kind of a carryover from our evolutionary history, and it does have an altruistic design. And those little thoughts that we hear are whispers of ideas or messages that it thinks is going to keep us safe, but really, in all reality, kind of keeps us stuck. Kind of keeps us stuck where we are, and it keeps us from shining our light, and um, keeps us from putting ourselves out there and kind of growing into who we are meant to grow into. So it's really, we'll never get rid of it. It's not something you hear a lot of chatter about, you get rid of the inner critic or whatever, but you can. It's part of you, but you can soothe it, and you can learn how to work with it, and you can learn how to reprogram some of that thinking and shift
Yeah.
some of those perspectives. So,
Yes, yes. And yeah, it's a reality. Like you said, it
mhm.
doesn't go away. So what are six symptoms of our inner critic's whisperings?
Okay, okay. Yeah, well, there's more than this, but it's a good place to start. So, sometimes our inner critic's running the show for so long we don't even realize that it's happening. We just hear these thought processes all day long, and it starts to begin feeling really normal. It really can drain our energy, can consistently cause us to feel unworthy or not enough in some way. And so some of the symptoms that I've kind of, in my work and with my work with clients, that I've kind of honed down as maybe the most common ones are, of course, your feelings of not enoughness. And, I'm not enough. I'm not worthy. Who am I to do this? Who am I to say this? And what was I thinking? And those kinds of things that come up. Um, in this area, we might feel misaligned. We might feel disconnected or unbalanced. We may feel we're not worthy. We might be resistant to accepting help from other people. Um, a lot of times, what happens is we feel a lack of trust in ourselves or others, or we kind of have that thought or that feeling that good things always come to others, but not to me. It's kind of like it's not meant for me, or success is just a pipe dream. It's kind of when those kinds of things come up that kind of resonate from our feelings of not enoughness. The second area that I often will talk about is judgment, self judgment, judgment of others, self doubt, worry. And that might look like thoughts like, I'm so stupid, or I can't do this, or um, thoughts or beliefs that we're focusing on in this way induce anxiety, and they kind of take away the joy in the moment. They can leave us feeling drained or negative or stuck or overwhelmed, or it's when we feel exhausted or powerless to change our situation. It kind of keeps us in a real low energy type of low energetic frequency place. And that's kind of where those come from. The third area, which kind of surprised me when I learned about this, is procrastination. Did you know procrastination kind of resonates from or comes out of your inner critic? And that'll show up in a couple of different ways. It might lead us to behaviors that keep us from putting ourselves out there. Again, playing small, filling up our day with tasks or task list, which kind of causes us to avoid getting to the big stuff that maybe we should do, or that would keep us moving forward. Um, or we could disengage using excuses like, I'm too busy, I'm too tired, I'm too overwhelmed, it's too hard. So, what that does is your little inner critic's whispering these things to you, and you tend not to take the action that you might otherwise take. Um, the fourth area I think is a big one
Can I
is
ask you?
yeah,
Sorry, I don't.
sure.
Does perfectionism come into play with the procrastination? Because maybe you think may not do it right, or you
For
know,
sure.
critic
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, for sure. I used to suffer from that too. I used to think that it had to be just right before I put it out there. And, dotting all my I's and crossing all my T's. Perfectionism is a big excuse
Yeah,
that causes us to procrastinate. So we'll want to get it just right before we put it out there. And um, that's a big one. I'm glad you brought that up. So,
yeah, I've had that too. It still
yeah.
comes sometimes.
It does, it sneaks up on you, and then once you have the awareness, kinda it's like, "Oh, okay, now I know what I'm doing," and so it's easy to kinda shift at that point. The other area I like to go into is what if thinking. What if they don't accept me? What if I get judged? What if I fail? What if it doesn't work? We hear those things too, and it keeps us from taking any action. It keeps us from kinda stepping into our truth. And what if I leave my job? What if I lose my job? What if money stops coming in? It's just this whole spiral. And we tend to go into that, what I like to call that what if down thinking, instead of thinking, what if the best could happen? What if it could turn out better than I could imagine? So we can shift that thinking, but we're kind of conditioned when we grow up with what if it goes wrong, right? So
Yeah,
just kind of understanding that we can shift those patterns and undo what our conditioning has taught us to do.
yeah,
So
because we do go there first.
yeah,
Within
yep,
just automatic, it just comes.
yeah, yeah.
Take something. Yeah.
It's crazy. And it comes up in everyday things. You're buying a house or you're looking for an apartment, and it's what if this, what if that, what if it's just this spiral, and it just takes us down. But
And
if we
keep from
realize,
decision making. Sorry.
yeah, yeah, no, I was just gonna say, if we realize it's coming from our inner critic and we have that awareness, we can kind of say, okay, this isn't my truth. And what if it goes better, and kind of shift it. So
Oh,
yeah,
yeah. And the decision making, it's like the fear of making the what if wrong decision. And that's a whole other
yes.
avenue there too.
For sure, for sure. Um, the fifth area that we all have at one time or another is fear or guilt. And, again, this kind of overlaps with the last one, but it's really focusing on the fears of the unknown, or the worst case scenarios. What if the worst happens? Well, what if the best happens?
Yeah.
And Guilt is a big one. It's often really difficult to release feelings of guilt, especially as women, and especially growing up in a society where there's certain expectations. And if we don't meet those expectations, we might feel guilty about them. And, it might cause us, we might have a fear of speaking up, speaking our truth. And often, a lot of times, we can expect the failures that we've had in the past may dictate our future, or we might get into the fear of what that future may bring. So we ruminate on the fears instead of really focusing on, well, how do I really want this to happen? How do I want my future to unfold? And it keeps us out of living in the present moment as well. So fear and guilt, they're just pervasive, and they're sneaky little devils.
Yeah. And it's constantly coming at us too. You watch the
Yeah.
news and that's all it is. It's just all
Yeah.
fear.
It sure is, and, if we've been around a real fearful person, it's hard not to stave off that energy sometimes, if, um, you've got someone that's fearing the weather or fearing politics or fear whatever it is,
Mhm.
it's sometimes it's really hard not to be kinda drawn into that, so if you're aware of that, you can do something about it, so.
Yeah, I stopped watching the news like 10 more
Yeah.
years ago, and it's like such a different energy to be in.
Yeah, I just don't want that energy in my awareness. So I'm pretty selective in what I'll watch and what I'll allow in. I'd rather listen to an uplifting podcast or music or whatever it is. So I just choose what I'm going to focus on. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, the last area that was another kind of a surprise to me, that it actually comes from your inner critic, is when you're feeling defensiveness. And usually we feel defensive when we're kind of in a low energetic place, or we're trying to protect ourselves for some reason. Someone might walk up and say, "Hey, have you ever tried it this way?" And you kind of get real defensive or react in kind of a closed way. So I guess when you're feeling defensive, no, that's kind of coming from your inner critic, because basically what it does is it kind of closes us down. We don't want to hear ideas and opinions. We might anger. I used to anger. I'd get angry um, easily. You might blame other people for things not going your way. Those are kind of the behaviors that will kind of come out of defensiveness. So when we feel ourselves feeling defensive, we can be aware. Hey, this is my inner critic trying to keep me safe in some way. Might be trying to keep me safe from facing something I don't want to face, um, or just keeping us in our lane, that kind of thing. So,
Yeah. And that's a whole different mindset to look at that ad from a different lens, because then you can transform that. Because
yes,
yeah,
yes. It's like,
it's
why am I feeling this
the
way?
power.
For
Yeah.
sure, for
Where it
sure.
doesn't feel like it in the moment because you're like, "Argh," but when you
Yes.
shift that, it's like, oh, you're in the driver's seat then.
For sure, for sure. We can kind of check in with ourselves and, okay, what am I feeling? Why am I feeling this way? Okay, what can I do to shift this and kind of keep us out of that way of being? So
Mhm. So how do you know if it's an inner critic or is it your inner wisdom?
it's really checking in to see how you feel. So if you think about the thoughts and the beliefs and these things come in, these reactions coming from your inner critic, they don't feel good in your body. They just don't feel good. They're resonating at a low energetic frequency. You don't feel good. They don't inspire you. Then you know it's coming from your inner critic. But if you have a thought that comes up that you get really excited about, or feel kind of passionate about, or just brings you joy, you know that those are intuitive hits, or thoughts and impulses coming from your inner wisdom instead. And those are the impulses that we want to follow. That's the place we want to live. They're high energy, they're high vibration. It's kind of trying to lead you towards something that may not even seem logical to you at the time, but it's really putting something in your path that that you probably ought to listen to, because it's probably going to take you to a better place in an easier way.
Mhm. And it'll keep nudging you.
Yes,
You right?
it will. It will.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
So then, so the inner critic, so you have some techniques that we can do to help soothe that
that
chatter?
little chatter.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Well, the one thing I like to do is kind of first look at some. I've got like journaling prompts or questions you can ask yourself that will kind of help you discern, okay, is this coming from my inner critic, or is this coming from my inner wisdom? So there's some questions you can ask yourself and really kind of dive in. And once you start to do this, you intuitively know right away, but as you're kind of learning how to do this, um, you can ask yourself some questions to figure it out. And the first thing I go to is, where did this belief begin? Do I remember it from childhood or from others in my life speaking it? Does it feel good? Does it not feel good? And if it's a thought that comes from childhood or younger, a different time in my life, it's probably the inner critic that's pushing that forward now. um the second thing I look at is, does this thought or belief I have ring true for me now? Is this something that feels good in my heart now, or was this something that I took on as a child that I learned from a parent or a grandparent, but now you're looking at it going, "It doesn't feel good to me now." Well, if not, you can probably choose to change that belief. You can choose to shift that belief in some way. Um, I might ask myself again, how does this thought or belief make me feel when I say it out loud? There's one thing to have it rolling around in your head, but another thing is say it out loud and see how it feels in your body. You'll have a reaction. It'll either be a constriction or a resistance. And if that's the case, then it's coming from your inner critic. If it makes you feel really good and it feels good saying it, well, it's probably coming from your inner wisdom. And this one I love because you've probably heard this one, but is this thought or this thing that's coming up for me, is this something I'm going to repeat to a child? And if it's not,
Mm.
then I shouldn't be saying it to myself. If it's something mean or disempowering, I'm certainly not going to say it to a 4-year-old. Well, if I shouldn't say it to a 4-year-old, I shouldn't allow myself to say it to myself or take that energy on.
And
So,
it's amazing how that happens, and
it,
we do that, and yeah, it is
yeah.
it's a good way to look at it.
For
Or you
sure, I would never say, "You're so stupid" to a little kid, or "You're so whatever," or "You're not enough."
did you do that? Or
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
What
that
were
was
you
a dumb
thinking?
thing to do. Yeah, what were you thinking? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so it's just kind of a check-in to say, "Hey, th if it doesn't feel good, I shouldn't be saying it to myself either."
Yeah, it's belittling. Why would you belittle yourself? And I know we've all done it, but the awareness.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure, for sure, for sure. Um And I think, things like when you really analyze it, you can analyze that thought or that belief from the perspective of, is this keeping me stuck? Is this keeping me from growing? And again, if it is, it's coming from your inner critic, and it's probably something you need to shift. And fine, we've kind of touched on this one, but is the thought I'm thinking right now, is it inspiring? Does it make me feel good? Does it fill me up with goodness? Then, yeah, yeah, it's coming from my inner wisdom. I probably ought to take note. But so again, those are some steps you can, or some questions you can kind of ask yourself as you kind of start playing with it. I like to think of it as just to play, because your inner critic is part of you. It's often part of your inner child. It comes from an experience in your past, so it's just a part of you that wants to be acknowledged. It's like, there's a couple of techniques where you can kind of make friends with your inner critic, because again, it's not going to go away. It's part of you, but you can soothe it down so that the inner critic kind of takes the back seat. You can kind of put yourself in the driver's seat and choose what thoughts and things that you allow in. Um, One of the things I like to do is I imagine it as if I can kind of pin down where did I first hear this thought? Maybe it was my 6-year-old self. Then I can, when this thought comes up, I kind of talk lovingly to it, and it may sound kind of silly, but imagine yourself getting down to the level of your 6-year-old self, giving her a hug, and thanking her. I hear you. We're safe. You're okay. See how things turn out. And it's really about acknowledging and um, letting that little piece of you that wasn't heard when you were 6, you're acknowledging her now. You're hearing her now. You're soothing her at that moment. And it's kind of saying, okay, you're come along with me, but you're not going to drive my thoughts anymore. It's
Mhm.
all good. Um, I like that because you can visualize it. You can kind of resolve some of those past issues if you look at it in that way.
Mhm.
Um, but that's one technique. Another technique is you can give your inner critic an identity. If you can't if you can't pin it down to it's my 6-year-old self or my 4-year-old self, you can give it another identity. Uh, it's a barking puppy. Imagine it's just a barking puppy that's jumping up and trying to get your attention, and you pat it on the head. Okay, Charlie, you can
Nice.
just go outside. I got this. We're all good. But it's
Yeah.
just bringing that awareness in how you think about those things and shift your perspective and do it in a loving way, not in a negative way, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And what you said right before that last piece was, you and I was thinking in my head, like, you wouldn't turn your back to a 4-year-old, you know?
Right.
So it's like you not doing that, ignoring and petting. I guess it goes along
Mhm.
with these too. You're, acknowledging and being aware and noticing. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And what's interesting is because these voices come from like when they're childhood memories. As a child, we only have so much capacity to make and our decision making skills, right?
Mhm.
So let's say, a 4-year-old has a little drawing she did, and mom's making dinner right then and can't give her full attention, and she's like, mom, look, and mom kind of shoos her off. Well, in that little 4-year-old's mind, it's, oh, she doesn't love me, I'm not important. And that's how those beliefs and things are made because they don't have the reasoning capability. And then that gets carried through to adulthood, and so there's, it forms these senses of not enoughness, these feelings of I'm not worthy, I'm not enough, she doesn't love me, which is not the truth. It's just how it kind of manifests itself. So going back to that 4-year-old self now, giving her the hugs, giving her the acknowledgement, letting her feel heard helps soothe that voice going forward. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So good. So important. So great. This was wonderful. Love the information and and ways and techniques that we can soothe that inner critic, because
Oh, thank you.
you
Thank
said it's
you.
not gonna go away. Yeah, yeah. So you also have a free gift that can help people. What's your free gift?
I do. And I love those. I love doing this work. So if anything I can share is wonderful. I have an e-guide. It's just a digital download. It's called 3 Ways to Soothe Your Inner Critic so you can hear your inner wisdom e-guide. And yeah, so I just love sharing that. And yeah.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. It is so important because, like you were saying earlier, it holds you back from what you want to do in your life. It holds you back from so many things. So it's
Yes.
choosing the opposite.
And when we clear that space and we clear that chatter, that gives the room for the inner wisdom to start talking to us more clearly, for us to start hearing it more clearly. It's just kind of sitting there waiting for us to tune into that dial.
Yeah,
So,
good point, because otherwise it will overtake you, which we've
mhm,
all experienced at times, you know?
for sure, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Let that inner wisdom give it space to come in. It's almost
Mhm.
like if I think of the law of the is it the law of the vacuum, like, you've gotta let something go for that to come in and
Yes, yeah, it's
uh,
back to that concept of energy is never destroyed. It's
mhm.
gonna show up in one form or the other, right? So let's get rid of the lower level energy, the negative energy, but then replace it with the high energy, with high level frequency. And that's what we're doing when we allow that the inner wisdom to be louder in our life.
Yeah, and you can do it, you
Mhm.
can do it, and that sometimes can be a place of stuckness is like, "I don't know if I could do it, it's so strong."
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah, there's so many processes and things that you can use to practice and just it's shift that awareness and focus on what you want instead of what you don't.
yeah.
So,
All right, well, thank you, Karen. This
oh,
was
thank you. Thank you for having me. This was wonderful. And
yeah,
again, the
good.
series is great. So thank you so much.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Bye for now.
Bye.